Hey, if you're looking to get your music up on all the platforms in one fell swoop, I highly recommend DistroKid. It's super simple to use, it's affordable, I've used it, and for our listeners, if you go to distrokid.com/VIP/talk guitars, you will get 30% off. That's distrokid.com/VIP/talk guitars. I hope you dig it. Hey everybody, it's Chris and Rick Talk Guitars, and we're going to do another 3 for 3 where Chris and I swap 3 songs and talk about them. We had such a good time doing this before. We're going to make it a thing, I think. I don't know what cadence it'll be, and I've heard from other people too that said they dug it. I think it's a cool thing for us, for Chris and I, to revisit songs maybe we haven't ever listened to or have listened to in a long time, or just to discover new stuff, which I really dig too. So let's get this started, man. So, Chris, why don't you start with the first song I gave you, and then we can talk about it.
Okay, what was the first song that you gave me?
The first song I gave you was What You're Doing by Rush, and it's the live version on All the World's a Stage.
Okay, I know that one. I didn't have to do much research for that one. That song is from the first record, which for me, I really like because it's very charming. I mean, it's like the early Rush where it's like notebook poetry lyrics and like of the era. And what I love about it is, I mean, I don't think there's anybody that denies that Rush was a really good group of musicians, but you can really, that whole record, you can really tell that there's 3 people doing that. And you're like, what the fuck, really? Mm-hmm. And, you know, and that's a good song for that. I reference that song a lot when I'm trying to get like a good guitar delay sound, because he's got the classic Echoplex, you know, Gibson Echoplex sound on that. Super cool. And that's a great example of early Rush when, you know, obviously it's a Led Zeppelin influence thing. Yep. But if you think about at the time, how many millions of guitar players probably had Led Zeppelin style songs, but Rush was able to take it and do something with it.
Yes.
So, you know, I really like what they did. The lyrics are funny, corny kind of, but really charming. And I love that. I always have a super fondness for that first Rush record and those songs. I dig it for that. One thing that's kind of interesting that I did when I was listening to it this time, in my mind, I had this idea about something that I thought to be. And so I tested it out. Mm-hmm. And I mean, no one's going to deny that Neil Peart isn't, you know, a drum god. He's fucking great. Yeah. And, you know, in that band, he made that band, you know, he was one of the 3 that made that band what it was. Right. But in that particular song, in my mind, I said, I think John Rutsey does this better, the drums. And if you listen to it, he does. He swings. At least at that point in Neil Peart's, whatever the fuck, however you say it, in his career, he started probably as a more technical person. So he's coming from that. And I know later he got way into like swinging and getting groove. But if you listen to that, John Rutsey's definitely closer to Bonham style with that little slip groove. So it's kind of cool for that. But it's still, both versions are awesome. And the live version, it's very inspiring to say, like, look what these guys are pulling off. And that was before, I think that was before they even had all the Taurus pedals and shit. Oh, yeah. Maybe. That was just like the rock incarnation. Like, this is just, you know, 3 rock people. They're doing this and they still got tons of shit to do, you know, at the same time. And that whole record is just very inspiring for like, this is what you can do live. If you really get good at your instrument and you're really dedicated, this is the sort of shit that you can pull off live. I mean, or at least aspire to do that. So it was great for that. Yeah. Trying to think of anything else that struck me about that.
Yeah, I want to hear your stuff and then I'll chime in.
Mainly it's just like that whole record, and I guess the Fly By Night record, for me, I reference them many times when I'm working on guitar delay sounds, because I love that echo. I don't have an Echoplex, but just to kind of get something going that kind of apes what that effect has on him. And he has such a great, you know, Gibson loud amp Echoplex sound. He was one of the, you know, him and Jimmy Page, of course, too. And maybe that's where he got it. But there's definitely the Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin influence there. But you can already hear where they're starting to go their own way. Even that was the first record. And it's like, they've got something else going on here. So no, it was good. I enjoyed it. Even though I've heard it many times, it was fun to listen to, kind of like clinically and like listening for things to talk about. So I dug it.
That's cool, because I just started listening to that album recently again. I mean, I don't think I'd listened to it in a long time. And I started from the beginning, and I'm like, this is cool. And I was digging it. And then I forgot about those early songs that Rutsey did that were introduced to that incarnation with Neil Peart. And I jumped down and listened to What You're Doing. And I was blown away because, like you said, they were big Zeppelin fans, obviously, but I think they took it and put their own stamp on it, which I thought was cool because it's very riff oriented and it's very, very Zeppelin-esque. But I think, their silly footprints are all over that thing, which I dig. But the thing that struck me was just Alex's guitar sound, like you were alluding to. It's like it's a Marshall through it's a Gibson Les Paul through Marshall amps, Marshall stacks with Echoplex. It sounds fucking awesome. Like it's got all these artifacts that I love, and it's just powerful, and it's like this breathing. It's like this big fucking monster on stage that it's like Bytor and the Snow Dog. Right. It's like there's this fight going on stage between Geddy's growly SVT and Ricky's and his rig, and I just fucking dug it. I just couldn't. I was really getting into it. I was listening to it on headphones, and just like his soloing on it is so amazing. But just the energy that they're pumping out as that trio, like you say, it's like that's three dudes, and it's just like the energy is insane, and it just caught me. And I love the contrast too in because I love that first Rush album a ton for all the reasons you mentioned. But I think Peart was like respectful of doing these first record songs. It's like, and he put his own, like you said, he came from a totally different place, but he brought it, and it's like, and it's fun to listen to side by side. Because you're right, Rutsey swings it, and it's more Bonham-esque and more Zeppelin-y, and fucking the Professor just puts his fucking coconuts on that shit. But I dug it. Yeah.
Rutsey does a little coconut action on that song too. But no, I think that's really, I got that too. I think that's really important that he was very respectful of those songs. It was like, he's way more capable of doing like some fancy stuff in a lot of those songs. He just remained like, respectful, which is good because that's, us that love those songs, that's what we liked about him. So it was great, but it was just a little, he wasn't quite there yet with the swing, that came later. And I know personally, have known drummers like that were just technically, they just, guitar players do that too. They'll go for, I want to learn leads, and they won't learn rhythm guitar for a long time, and you're playing with them. It's like, this guy is rushing or he's behind. It's like, but he can blow, these amazing leads. It's like, sometimes it takes a while for something to catch up, or, you go I went the other way. Like I think a lot of people did. It's like, first of all, I got to learn how to play chords, and then I'll worry about that. So, but yeah. I think that was important what you said, because I did get the same thing, that those songs he played very respectfully. So
because it's like he wasn't even there for that first album, but I think he dug just seeing what he could do with that stuff, and it is cool because the syncopated runs in that song too are very kind of foretelling of where Rush was going to go,
right,
with their prog stuff, right? The
very next album, right, where they drop out one beat. Yes. I forget what song it is. Like they go around every time around, they drop out one beat. Right. It's like, oh look, they're counting.
Yeah, exactly.
No, definitely. Yeah, they had everything. I mean, a lot of the great bands, you listen to the first things they've done, and everything's there. You can hear it. The little bits poking out and stuff. So definitely, because that record was very early in their career. That live record, that was like what, number 4?
I think so. And that's what's so cool about it, is it's kind of capturing that transition from the first album to when Peart joined the band, and like you said, it's still very rock. I think it's kind of a little bit of before they started doing the synths and the mode.
Right. That's the Phase Shifter, the last Phase Shifter record. And then I loved his Phase Shifter.
Oh,
era.
Dude, totally, man. But this song, man, like when it just first started, I was just blown away by how cool it was and how great they did it live. Like, and again, like Alex's guitar sound just blew my mind, because I bought that was my first Rush album that I bought, was All There Was a Stage. I was on a soccer team. Yeah. And the goalie's like, dude, you need to get this album. And I'm like, okay. So I just went and bought that, and I was blown away. And then that was my entree into that band, is that live album. So it's kind of cool because that is kind of a transitional period for that band, and I kind of caught it And then I got the first album and then started getting the whole ball of wax.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That was the same thing for me. It's so funny. Someone gave me a cassette of that. Well, I heard the band and I'm like, I got to get some of this band. And I'm like, hey, make me this, a cassette. I gave him a cassette, record me something. And he did the live album. So I had that. So I got familiar with all these songs. It was very exciting to get the records, the studio records.
Yeah.
And I didn't get the last one for years, or the first one for years. But the first one I got after the live one was Fly By Night, which has always been one of my, I mean, all of the early ones are my favorites. But so it was an exciting thing, like having those live versions and like, that record has this. I want that, and this and this. So that was where I started too. I remember playing that for my mom. I mean, I was so excited about this band, and I'm like, she was like very polite and like, oh yeah, that's cool. And I'm like, that's just like, well, hello everybody, how you doing? It's like that. She was probably going, what is this fucking horse shit?
I love that you played it for your mom though.
Yeah.
And she's like, yes, dear, that's nice.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Very supportive mothers and children of the 70s. Let them be rock and rollers.
That's so fucking cool. All right. Well, yeah. So again, we're going to post on our site. We'll post links to these songs and all that stuff. That was fun. I loved it. So we're going to do one of Chris's now. And I'm going to talk about it. It's the Cowboy Junkies, the Trinity Sessions, and it's Misguided Angel. And I dug this. For me, it's funny. It reminded me a lot of Evangeline, that band you were in. Very Evangeline vibes from me. But I love the guitar. The whole song is very atmospheric and kind of somber or moody. I don't know, kind of along those lines. But I love the strum. I love the kind of lonesome, kind of reverby, clean strumming of the guitar. It kind of just mesmerized me and kind of really drew me into the song, which I totally dug. And then I love the harp and all the different things. It kind of had all the things I love about this genre of music. It had the accordion, it had the harp, I think mandolin was in there. But overall, and I remember the Cowboy Junkies. I got into them a little bit back when they were a thing, but not too heavy. But so it was really cool to visit this song and listen to it with fresh ears and kind of get into it. But I was just struck by kind of the mood that the band created around this song that was so effective, that really, it moved me. So, yeah. What's your take?
No, that was a good take. I mean, that you mentioned the guitar. First, a little bit of background. I came across this a few days. I don't have that many vinyl records. I have probably between 300 and 400, but I do have things sometimes I'll be looking through and I'm like, I forgot I had this. And I found that. So it kind of like brought back this flood of memories, that when I found about that band was, I think the year of the record that came out in 1988 was the perfect time for me. I had just gone through this. I was getting into like roots music big time. I was like country music for the first time, like really getting into country music. But I'd read like Robert Palmer's deep blues book. So I was getting into a lot of early blues music and, all this like rootsy stuff. And Hank Williams, I was listening to a lot of Hank Williams, and this record came out and it spoke to me so much. And that song I could have picked just about any song on there because they're all great. But that one I picked because it's one of theirs. They wrote it. There's a bunch of covers on that record too. But the whole record is a vibe. It's super low key, but and it's something you probably don't want to put on a party. But the record is pretty amazing for a number of reasons. First of all, it was recorded with one microphone. You listen to that record, everything was recorded with one microphone. Those people, like you mentioned, like the auxiliary people playing, like the accordion player and whatever, the harp player. They haven't played together. Some of them haven't played together before those sessions. They sat there and they did a few takes and they got it. So that's like, I love it. That's kind of like musicianship at its finest. It's like we have one microphone and we're in this church and we got to play and we got to make sure everybody's heard and that everything just. We have this glorious like angelic voice that this otherworldly voice. We all have to support that. And the guitar player, who like I probably never would get mentioned, let's talk about guitar players. Let's talk about Michael Timmons. I think that's his name, like the guitar player. But I have so much respect for him. And that record was such an influence because, as you mentioned, that guitar, which I believe he was playing a Stratocaster, a 70 Stratocaster into a Fender Twin.
Oh, I love
and
it.
the amp is pretty loud, but he's playing dynamically.
Yes.
And, it's like he's just laying down this bed, this like groove that you fall in, this bed for all these instruments, to come in, and he's just super solid. And I love playing like that. I've played in bands before with other like instruments, and I've played that with an electric guitar, a part that's usually reserved for like an acoustic guitar, but you're going to do that thing with it where you're just like supporting all these other instruments. And he does it just unflinchingly. He's got the groove, and you can tell by listening to that he's in that groove. You fall into that groove, and you just let things happen, and you just support it. So, I mean, I give great props to that. And that's something that really influenced me. And the way that I play a lot of times when I'm playing like rootsy stuff and I'm playing an electric guitar in that context, that whole like let's just do it, form a bed. And I love to get in that zone where you just close your eyes and you're just listening to everything. So you're experiencing. It's not like trying to push anything or pull anything, or it's just this great place to be. And another thing about that record that I was thinking after I just rediscovered it here the other day was that was a huge influence on me. And I went and I looked up that record because it's been years since I even thought about it. Mm-hmm. And I found three blog posts by Michael Timmons about that record. And I found out, I knew that it was recorded in a church with one microphone, but I didn't know the whole story behind that. At that time, it must have been like 1987 before that record came out. They were touring the South USA. They're from Canada. They were touring the South, and they really got into country music. So they're listening to all this stuff on the radio as they're touring, and they're doing like their first record, they're kind of touring that record. And they came back and they were influenced by all this Americana and like country music and roots blues and all this stuff. And so they wanted to do a record that kind of just took what they experienced and put it into music. So they came up with this record, which is it's a brilliant record for that. And to think that he went out and toured the United States, had that experience, came back and made a record. And then I listened to it in 1988, and it influenced me enough to like within 10 years to come up with something that was kind of based on that format, the Evangeline band that you mentioned. It's like this musical influence. It's almost like folk music itself. It's like, just passed on. So I thought it was really cool for that. And that's where I learned that, some of those musicians, they hadn't played together before. They showed up at the church and here we go, let's do this. So it's pretty interesting. It's a fascinating record for just as an experience. I could put it on and just experience it. There's a Velvet Underground song on there, Sweet Jane, and Lou Reed himself said that was one of his favorite versions ever.
That's so cool.
And he's like, he can be kind of, opinionated. So and that was funny because at that time too, I had just gotten into the Velvet Underground. It was all this roots music and that. So that was like the perfect record.
Oh yeah. Another
thing about that record that it sticks in my mind when I think back on it, I was partying a lot back then. That record was a lot of times was the sun's coming up after drinking all night, hanging out, we're winding down, and that record comes out. And for that, it'll always have that feel for me, like the sun coming up. And pedal steel, that was the first time I said, I have to play with pedal steel guitar. I mean, I just love how sad, to me, that's one of the saddest instruments in the world. And luckily I got to play with two good pedal steel players in my life of playing music. And it was so great. And when I did, I kind of used that format. I have a loud amp, right? It's dynamic, it's loud. But you strum lightly, and it just gives you that effect. That's a Stratocaster. It doesn't sound twinky.
No, not at all.
It's very fat because it's loud and it's played quietly. It's like all, dynamic. You have someplace to go. I mean, if he hit a really loud chord, it would just like kill everybody in there. But no, that's like on a record that I kind of forgot about, but was a huge influence. And it's just like an experience. That record is just an experience. And one last thing, it's funny because I wanted to do a search, like, well, how does this band holding up? What do they think about this record all these years later? And I found some gear site where someone mentioned this record. And some guy was like, thought it was really cool, a guitar player or something. And people were pissed at how mellow it was. You know what I mean? They're like, oh no, man, I can't. That's just so low, snooze fest. And I'm like,
ridiculous.
Well, no, I mean, I get that. It's super, super mellow. And like I said, if you put it on a party, the thing of it is being able to appreciate that makes like appreciating something like Motorhead or the Ramones, it makes you appreciate them more. I mean, it's just like there's dynamics. I mean, that's a really good exercise in dynamics. And like, I don't know. I just thought it was funny more than anything. I just thought that's kind of funny that people would seem like they're getting pissed that it was so mellow. And I'm like, that's kind of the beauty of that record. It's super, super beautiful and lulls you. And I don't know. Great record, great song, great guitar, I guess.
Well, the thing I dug about it when I was listening to you talk is that's the cool thing about music or art is it can inspire generations of people, regardless of how much success you get or whatever. I love that. And to me, that's what I think all artists should keep in mind. It's because it's tough to be an artist. You know, most artists don't make it big or, you know, maybe they reach a certain level and all kinds of artists live with resentment or whatever feelings about not achieving whatever goals they had in their head. But this band from Canada got into this country music and came to the United States and recorded like all the old country people did. They'd stick a mic in the middle of the room and get around it and record a fucking album or a song. And that's cool. That's inspirational. And what spawned that is all those artists before them that they researched or, you know, came upon. And I love that. That is what really makes me happy. And you know, those stories about artists that get inspired by previous generations or other genres or whatever it is, and then they take it and they do their thing with it. And I think that's so cool. But I mean, yeah, it is funny. It's funny that it would trigger somebody that it's so mellow, but that's, you know, as you get older, you should appreciate all kinds of different music and all kinds of different modes of music, right? Like, because
except for the stuff that sucks.
Yeah, except for the sucky stuff. But yeah, I'm like you. I just love this. The atmosphere they created as a band in that context is fucking cool. You know, they capture this vibe so well, and they're all, and like you say, that's what I love about. I mean, you know, it reminds me of bluegrass because there's you know, there's like 10 guys around a mic, and they all use dynamics live so that the soloist takes their little part, right? And they all kind of mellow out and then boom. And that's what's cool about this recording is that it's a very similar idea. It's like, well, we're all in this room where there's one mic, so we got to figure out how to make it work. And
right.
That is cool. Like you said, that's, you know, what all musicians should do is different ways of playing with other people. So cool. Awesome. Well, that was a great choice, and I really enjoyed listening to that. So the next one is one of mine that I gave Chris. It's Elvis Costello. The album is My Aim Is True. And the song is Watching the Detectives. And I'm really curious to know kind of your take on this tune.
Sure, my take. I'm familiar with the song. I know about Elvis Costello. I never did a deep dive. I was never really that into him, not because he wasn't any good, just because I didn't go there. But I put that song on, and I was familiar with it, but now I'm listening, like critically listening to, you know, to hear things to talk about. That's and awesome. The first thing I think when the James Bond style guitar comes in, I'm like, I know why Rick likes this. It's because it could have been the Pretenders. You know what I mean? It could have been James Honeymoon Scott playing that. It's like it's got that vibe, and that's probably influenced the Pretenders, or it was kind of around the same time. I think Elvis Costello was a little earlier, but I really didn't know anything about that. And, you know, it was one song that you gave me that I listened to, and we'll talk about that. But I had to, like I was just saying before, I have to take this into context. So I went back and I listened to the whole My Aim Is True. And there's about 3 or 4 songs on it that I've loved and I've always loved. The rest of them I hadn't really listened to that much. And I never listened in the context of that record. I don't think I ever put that. I had this year's Model, and I listened to that a few times, but then it kind of fell off my listening list. But, you know, I want to hear it in context, and then I listen to it, take it in, and then I do a little bit of like to poke around and find out what went behind that record on making it. And it was interesting because the guitar on that Costello played, he didn't have his signature. What was it that the Jazz Master, which we associate with him. It was a Telecaster, and he was kind of bitching about it. It was like so bright, hard to deal with. But I mean, that guitar tone on that part, that James Bond part, is really cool. So yeah, that was interesting to know there. And you know, the reggae thing right away. It's like, you know, reggae was so huge in the UK at that time. You know, and it was filtered to overhear us by bands like the Clash and the Stones and all that stuff. But it was a huge, huge influence there. And it was interesting for me to learn that that song came about by Elvis Costello, got the first Clash record, and he was listening to it, and he hated it at first. He's like, what is this garbage or whatever? And the more he listened to it, the more it got to him, the more he liked it. And he ended up really loving it. And he wrote that song based on that Clash record. And it's funny because the Clash was the first band for me that made me kind of like reggae. You know what I mean? It's like, I always joke that, you know, I always seem to like reggae by white people that don't know how to play reggae. Yeah. Because I really love the way that Clash did that. So I didn't know that. It's interesting. I guess I can kind of see that a little bit, but not really. It's like, to me, Elvis Costello and his songwriting is so iconic in a way it is that it doesn't really, it's just a different approach. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yep.
So I can see that a little bit. The one thing about Elvis Costello, and maybe there was a reason that I didn't really explore him as much as I probably should have, is I have this weird thing. Like, there's a difference to me between like songwriting and songcraft. You know what I mean? It's a stupid little difference, but he was definitely a song crafter, especially at that point, because, you know, it seems like he labored over every line in that song because it's perfect. You know what I mean?
I love it.
And
Yeah.
his voice is great. And for me, it's like, I'm more like a Lou Reed style where it's like, it's more conversational. It's like there's throwaway lines. It's like, as a song, it's like, it's more like a conversation. And his is more clever, which is great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that was a kind of a stumbling block for me.
Yeah.
It's interesting when I was listening to the full record, I don't know what I was listening on Spotify and something happened. And all of a sudden I'm listening like, oh, what's this? This sounds great. This is kind of like, sounds like country. This is awesome. I didn't remember this. It's jumped over to the King of America, which was a different record. And so I got to hear a little bit down the road where he was going. And that was definitely more my speed.
Yeah.
But going back to this, it was definitely, I mean, the songs that I like on there, I've always, Allison is like a soulful, great, like timeless classic song.
Yeah.
Less Than Zero is fucking great. And there's another one that's like some song that I just love. I love doing these things, these 3 for 3s, because it makes me listen to stuff in a way that I wouldn't listen to it, that, you know, it just kind of like fell off my radar, or I never went down that road, you know, when I was listening to music. And sometimes it can be really helpful. And one thing I've noticed about myself is a lot of times stuff will come out and I'm not ready for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it'll be years down the road where I'm like, you know, what's that? I don't get that. I don't like that. That's crap, whatever. And then I'm ready for it. And I end up liking it. And so my musical world gets a little bit bigger. And, you know, I never go the other way, it seems. You know, it's not like, what was I thinking with that garbage? It's just so your musical world gets better. And that's why I like these. But it also makes you listen to music in a way and take little things and ideas. It's that whole thing we talk about, being influenced by people. It's like the folk thing where it just conversational things pass on to people and people, from people to people to people. So what else was I going to say about that? I didn't know that's not the Attractions. That's Graham Parker's band. I guess is the band on that.
Oh, that's
I didn't know that. And that's what's his face? The dude, Rockpile dude.
Nick Lowe.
Yeah, he produced that. It's good. It's good. It's kind of rough sounding in a cool way. I mean, it's very real sounding.
Yeah.
Elvis Costello was an artist. I think the critics loved him, but for a lot of people like us in the Midwest, like the little rocker kids, we were kind of confused. It's like, is he punk? Is he new wave? What is it like? That kind of shit mattered, which is really stupid now.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing about that I learned from doing research is we think of Elvis Costello during that period. We think about the Buddy Holly glasses, the Jazz Master, that whole look, the cuffed pants, and, you know, and that was totally fabricated after that record. And I mean, I'm not saying fabricated in a negative way, because that's how shit got done back there. You know, it's like, I'm an artist, I'm a performer. This is what I'm going to do, and this is my music, and this is the way we're going to present it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that became so iconic, and so that early Elvis Costello music. And you just assume, you know, it's like, oh yeah, Allison, he's singing that, he's playing that Jazz Master, and he's got his Buddy Holly glasses. But it was different, you know. I like listening to people's first records. As a first record, it was pretty fucking brilliant, you know. I mean, and of course he did get proper props from critics. I mean, they loved that record. That gave, you know, critics. It was funny because when I was researching this, I was on, I think, a Wikipedia, and there was a quote about that record from my friend who's a rock critic, and I just thought that was so cool. It's like, hey, Mark's like has a quote on this article about this record, so I thought that was really cool. Small world shit.
What did he say about it? Or was it?
He said it was great. I forget.
Cool.
I forget what it was, but I mean, he's the one. I got the what's the next? Was it this year's model? Yeah, I think I taped it. His record copy of that. Cool. So he's the one that had the record collection that I was sorting through, where I got to hear all this shit. That was awesome. That's another influence. So yeah. So I know I'm rambling here, but no.
I love it, dude. Yeah, because I was so curious to know, because I know, you know, Elvis wasn't necessarily one of your guys, but I think it's so cool that you revisit this stuff and listen to it with fresh ears, and you bring something different away from it, you know. And I'm the same way. We all are. We, you know, when we're younger, maybe we write stuff off or it doesn't speak to us, and then later on we give it, if we're lucky, we give it a visit, and it has a different impact on us. But Elvis is one of my guys. Like, from back in the 70s, I heard his stuff and just it resonated with me, man. And I love people who can craft songs, because he is clever, but to me, he straddles that line between being too clever or for me anyway, it's just right. Like the lyrics in that song are insane.
It's brilliant. No, it
pulls
is.
your eyes out with a face like a magnet. Like
Yeah.
that's insane.
No,
And
I'm not. Yeah.
no,
I'm
no,
not
no,
saying-
dude. I know, but it's like, and I totally hear what you're saying too. But for me, man, all his shit just resonated with me. And once the Attractions came on board, that band
Yeah.
is fucking insane, dude.
Yeah.
Every member of that band brought it and just brought their own thing to the game. But this, yeah, it is funny. We're talking about first albums, like Rush's first album, his first album. It's different from when he started to get the Attractions and other things in certain ways, but in a lot of ways, it's very, it's Elvis, it's his thing. But this song in particular too, there's a cool video, I should send it to you, where Elvis talks about that Telecaster. So he knew a dude that worked at Fender, and he bought a brand new Telecaster, and he said the action was like an inch off the fretboard, but he was so naive, he didn't know you could change the adjust the action, so he just played it for 2 years like that. That was his guitar,
right?
Like, and then finally he was at a pawn shop or somewhere, and he found the Jazzmaster and dug it and started playing it. So I don't know, to me the guitar on that recording sounds like a Jazzmaster. It's got that single coil plunky, that kind of sound. I don't know if it is or not, or if it's the Tele, but
it's a Telecaster. But that's a
Telecaster?
That's a very important thing, because what we're going to talk about when we come up here is something like that's a good observation. It's something that is really a thing, and and we'll get into that later. But I just thought of something too about this. I'm still in that era of like 1988, where I'm living with this person who I just mentioned, who is a rock critic. I'm living with him in in Lansing, Michigan. We have a house and a band together, and that was where I first made a kind of a connection with Elvis Costello, where I said, oh, this guy's fucking really great. And he did a duet with George Jones. And my friend had that record. It was called Stranger in the House. And I was really into country music, so that was a perfect time for me to get it. And I'm like, this guy's voice is incredible, and this song is incredible. And that's an Elvis Costello song that he did with George Jones. So that's weird. All this stuff is coming back to this period of time. The next record that my pick that we're going to talk about is from that same period. So it's 1988. And, where these songs that we're talking about kind of converge. It's just kind of interesting. It's just a weird thing that just
I love it. I love it. Along the lines of what you said about his duet with George Jones, the thing I loved about him as I knew more, as I grew to know more about him, Elvis, is he's a huge music fan. I mean, huge. I think he had a show, it was called Palladium, or it was on Palladium or something, but he would bring on artists and interview them, and he was gushing like everybody he brought on. He loved country artists, blues artists, you name it. He was
country,
super music fan, And so that's another thing I dug about him, and also just as an artist and a person, is his love of music and other genres and other people. But watching The Detectives, again, he talked about the secret agent, it sounds like a secret agent, like a 007, that lick, and he mentioned that in the video, he drew from that, right? He loved, that genre of movie and all that stuff, the secret agent stuff. And he drew from that for this song. So for me, the guitar parts are so cool because, again, they're minimalist and supportive. Like if you listen to the stuff he's doing in between, like in the verses and all that other stuff, it's very cool. It's chunky rhythm, but it's very supportive, and I totally dug it. And then of course the signature line that is so cool, it's got the vibrato or trem on it, and it's the secret agent lick that is so cool throughout the song. And I love Nick Lowe's production, actually. I think he had a label called Stiff, and he produced a lot of those cats in that genre in the late 70s, early 80s, and I just love his whole aesthetic and his stuff. But like you said, this album is a great album. I Am Is True. I love that album too, for the reasons you cited. This song, I hadn't listened to it in a long time either, and I revisited it with headphones again, and I've really been doing that a lot, is putting the headphones on and listening to music. And it's such a cool thing to do, because you really can get into the nitty gritty of what all the people are doing and how you appreciate, the choices they make and how they apply themselves to create this thing, that everybody's trying to achieve, this idea, this musical idea. I just think this is one of my favorite songs of his, and the lyrics to me, again, are just so amazing. Like he evokes visually, through his lyrics. You can just see this playing out, right? Like they're dragging the lake, all this. It's just so cool. But anyway, he's one of my guys. And so I'm glad you took some stuff away from it and made the tie into the 80s and stuff and your connection to that other guy. And I think that's so cool. Well, we're going to do Chris's second tune, which is
only on two.
Right, Cooder. And it's the Paris, Texas soundtrack. And the track is Paris, Texas. This was another cool, I remember this soundtrack. I remember the movie and digging it, but I never really listened to the music, much. But again, I put it on and Ry Cooder is one of the, preeminent blues slide players. I mean, everybody loves this cat. He's one of those guys like, Dave Lindley, Ry Cooder. They're these people that just kind of rose to a certain level of respect among their peers and other musicians. And they played on tons of different stuff. And this song is, again, it's a soundtrack. So, moody, soulful. Again, I just love the artifacts it sounds to me like he's playing a metal slide. I don't know if it's true or not, but to me, it sounds like a metal slide, and it sounds so cool because I can hear it rattling against the strings, but it's also melodic and beautiful. And so I think that's one of the things I really dig about people who, any music really, I'm just drawn to melody, but especially in the blues oriented stuff or Americana or stuff. Just when there's melody infused in stuff that's moody and soulful, it really takes on, it just kicks it up several notches for me, because, you can do more straightforward, blues stuff. But when there's melody added and some beautiful stuff going on, it really takes it to another level. I really enjoyed that track.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, to say it's cinematic would be ridiculous because it's a soundtrack. But it is. But it's very cinematic. Yes. And again, this was another record that I found probably within months of the Cowboy Junkies. So I was in, that kind of frame of mind. Yeah. And I'd seen the movie like maybe a couple years before that. And then, I found the soundtrack around 88 or so in that time frame. And it just really, really spoke to me. And it's that thing that you mentioned before with Elvis Costello. It's like, it sounds to me like the Jazz Master because that's what I associated with him. Yeah. But, if you think about that, it's not the Jazz Master at Telecaster. It's Elvis Costello. Yeah. And it's what he plays. Yep. And listening to this record, again, the soundtrack to Paris, Texas, reminded, I was thinking about something. My friend sent me this video of this guy. There's entertaining videos where he has these themes like, where does the tone come from in an amplifier? And he does all this pseudoscientific thing to try to boil down where the tone comes from. And it's very entertaining, but I'm watching this. I'm like, this is so pointless. And then it dawned on me. It's like, I think it would be like in this quest for good quote tone. Sometimes if you think about it, I think the word tone gets kind of switched around with sound a lot of times. Yeah. There's a sound and then there's tone. You know what I mean? If you take Ry Cooder is a perfect example. I mean, this cat is, if you know anything about him, he's very, very into esoteric gear and he's very, tone quote oriented. Yeah. So, the microphones used on that record must have been amazing. The preamps used on that record must have been amazing. Everything was like really cool and he put a lot of detail into it. But that really has very little to do with tone. Yeah. I mean, when you listen to that, he has great tone. And where's that great tone? That great tone is his intonation. It's his dynamic. It's his vibrato. It's his choice of notes. It's like the space that he leaves. All that stuff is, whoops, just hit my mic. All that stuff is what we associate with tone. You know what I mean? So it's like we could go get those things that he has, but we're not going to sound like that, And we all know this. It's ridiculous because I mention this all the time. We all know this, but we all go on the search for this quote tone quest. And that was the first time it dawned on me. I'm like, I was listening to that record this time. I listened to it over the course of a few days. It really inspired me to like kind of try some acoustic music. And so what I did, instead of going, I want to sound like this, instead of me saying, what did he use? Let me go on the internet, find out what he used and get all this stuff. It's like, how is he playing? You know what I mean? So I took like my Martin, I have a D18 and I took a microphone and my software. And I like got the best mic I could, the best preamp I could, and got this good sound. And then I just kind of like let how he was playing kind of influence. I'm like, I want to do something that's really kind of cinematic and emotional. There's lots of cool space. I'll find some good reverb, and I want to, drag a slide across there, get the string noise, all of this stuff. And that got me a lot closer to getting like what I perceived as his tone, or because it's not really the tone we're looking for. It's the vibe. We want something to make that's that cool.
Yeah.
And I think that recognizing that instead of like, what's the perfect preamp to get this tone? What's the perfect microphone to get this tone? It's like, just what is it about his playing that makes me want to get that tone? I mean, when I was talking to my friend that sent me that video where I was, he was asking me why I thought it was kind of pointless. I'm like, I worked in a vintage guitar shop for years. You know what I mean? I saw these world-class amplifiers. It's like the holy grail amplifier. I've heard people come in there and sound like garbage through them. You know what I mean? It's like that tone isn't coming from that amplifier. You know what I mean? It's like a platform. And, when you think about Cooder, he's definitely looking for like, he's definitely on a quote tone quest, because he's looking for things that brings these things out of him. And they do. And it's the way that he interacts with it. But all of the tone is coming from him. It's his playing. It's the way he plays. And that's the same thing. Like if you think about a violinist, right? A violinist can be known to have good tone, right? And what is good tone? I mean, the instrument is going to be part of it. But no, it's going to be his vibrato. It's going to be, his intonation. It's going to be, his phrasing, everything. That's what gives him good tone. That's where it comes from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's listening to that record just brought back, nostalgia is always a big part of me liking music. And that's sometimes why I, can't get out of the past. But that record is it's just another one. It's an experience. I don't want to put that on when I'm cleaning the house, or I don't want to put it on if I'm like, doing something. I want to just experience that record, put it on maybe early in the morning and listen to it. So it was great for that. I don't know if you listened to the whole record, but it's really, again, this all three of the ones that I picked. I could have probably picked better guitar songs, but it was just the reason I picked this one is because, the movie, people may have probably seen the movie, and this is the kickoff thing. So it's like the most thing that reminds me of the movie. And the movie's great too. If you've never seen the movie, it's super cool. The music fits the movie really well. So no,
I dug it. I thought it was a great choice. Yeah.
And Dave Lindley's on that record too. I don't know if you know that.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. He was another super cool. Yeah. I really dug that choice. Well, let's go on to the third one that I sent Chris, which is Crowded House, the album Crowded House, and the song Don't Dream It's Over. I mean, we've all heard this song a million times. But again, I revisited it, and I'm super curious to know your take on it, Chris.
My take is this. If I were making a movie taking place in the mid 80s, this would have to be on the soundtrack. I mean, that's what this song is for me. It was like on the peripheral. It was the radio, it was like the undeniable, hook that got into your daily life. And you heard it like Tears for Fears is like that too. That same on the radio. And so it's very evocative. And again, I just mentioned me being nostalgic. So I love it for that. You put it on and it's like you're transported right back to that time. And if you were around, like I was into music, I was playing music at that time. I didn't look at it as something that I aspired to. I could definitely appreciate it. I thought it was a brilliant pop song, and I loved having it as the background to my life back then. But this is the first time I ever really looked into it that closely. When you mention that song, I'm like, oh, it's going to have 80s chorus. And it does. But it's great. It's great the way that it has it. It's just, the song is so dreamy anyways that it fits really well with that. And it's good to hear an actual chorus pedal and not the digital chorus that we have now. And you can see that, like, you sent me a video of Tim Pierce because he played on that, the guitarist, studio guitarist. And so he's got a really interesting video where he's talking about it. And it was really fascinating to hear him talk about that. But the sound he's got set up for doing that now is so not what it was then. You know what I mean? It's like, if people listen to that, it's like, oh, that sounds great. And it does, but it sounds like a preset. It sounds like a modeled, it's too good or something like that. And having like an old Chewy like chorus, it's probably a boss.
I would imagine,
because it is shimmery, more shimmery. I have a DOD chorus here that is it's kind of dark and it's more like a phaser. And I love that. That's a really cool sounding. But there's nothing that beats analog chorus for there's a little bit more meat to it. Not to be that annoying guy, here's the digital versus, I love digital. Digital is a big part of my life, but there is a big difference. And when you get to experience it, it's very apparent that, and to hear that it was great to see the Tim Pierce video because you can see where technology got us for. Stuff sounds great now, but it's not the same. You know what I mean? There's and I loved. Talk a little bit about that video because it was really fun and it was really interesting. He was talking about because he has a demo on cassette from when they were first learning that song, and he plays it. And when he's playing, he's like talking about, he's kind of giving himself shit for like, I was playing too much solo and overplaying. But I thought that was great because that's exactly what happens with a guitar player. That's what you're learning the song and you overplay, and everything he plays sounds cool. You know what I mean? It's like he definitely, you know, he can play the fucking guitar. It's cool. But you're like, no, there's nothing wrong with that. This sounds good. But then you hear where he eventually ended up, and it's like, that's right. He did, you know, and it's so cool to see a guitar player that can say, I can do all this stuff. Towards the end, you know, he plays the modern version where he's just like, you know, shredding on this stuff, and he's still good at guitar. But to hear where he went for the song and, you know, what he did to make it perfectly dreamy is like, yeah, that's cool. And that's what a good guitarist does. So it was cool for that. What else? Gosh, I don't know. Yeah, that's the only, there's a movie, Donnie Darko. I don't know if you've ever heard that movie. It's a Jake Gyllenhaal movie. But they use Tears for Fears in that movie in the way that I'd like to use The Crowded House in another movie. It's like, it's so, it just sets the story just in a vibe. You know what I mean? It's just, and I did listen to that whole record, but I don't remember much of it because I wanted to do that too with that record, is listen to it.
It's a great record. Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, there was another one that there's so many bands that I just, you know, I don't know why, for whatever reason, it's like you just don't go there. I mean, maybe it was because it was on the radio. It's like, that's just, you know, that's consumer music or whatever. I don't know. That's for the masses. I'm choosing my own musical playlist. And at that time, when that came out, like 86, was that 85 or 86?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, because at that period,
I think it might have been 85. Yeah,
my musical trajectory at that point was, I was coming out of like a classic rock, and at the end of my classic rock, I had like a first wave, like, you know, UK metal, like Judas Priest and UFO and all that stuff. And I was really into that. And then I left there. I got into college rock. You know, it was like I was listening to a lot, you know, all that college rock that was coming out in the mid 80s. And so that was where my head was at. And anything that I heard on the radio, I would appreciate. I did a lot of driving, so I would have heard that all the time. So, you know, it definitely very, very. And I mean, this is another thing that points out in the Tim Pierce video is like how good of a singer that guy is. Because on those demos,
the demo's like, insane. Yeah,
he's just like, it sounds like the record. He's like, I hate people like that. Just go ahead, sing. All right, sing again. Oh, you just sang it the same way, instead of me like comping a bunch of tracks to get one that I can stand. So no, it was cool. I mean, it was definitely enjoyable to listen to that and like go down that path.
That's awesome. Yeah, and so. Same thing. I mean, that song takes me back to that time period, and Crowded House was huge. I mean, they kind of burst onto the scene, and they had tons of hits on that album, and then continued to kind of ride that wave for a few albums. They were huge. I came across that video because I didn't know who played, you know, I didn't know who was playing the second guitar parts on that record at all. I knew Neil Finn could play guitar, and I think he played a lot of the rhythm, and he might have even played the lead or most of the lead on that song. But that is exactly what I took away from it too, which is so cool, is like there are so many choices that can be made by all the musicians on a song. And I loved seeing his evolution. Exactly. He's just noodling, you know, trying to get a feel for the song, and he's doing all that stuff that's overplaying. And then you hear the cool stuff he ended up doing on the record, and exactly, that's what the song called for. And it's so cool when that happens, you know, because sometimes it doesn't happen. And it makes the song, just that background stuff is so cool and atmospheric and lush, and adds to the dreamy nature of this song so much. And I just totally dug hearing him talk about it. And he's a cool dude. He's very self-effacing and very self-aware. Yeah, he's a session guy in LA. He's probably played on a shit ton of stuff. I had no idea he played on the Crowded House stuff, but just hearing him talk about it was really, really cool.
And point out really quick that, because he said that was his own words. He said he overplayed. And it's not like when you or I overplay, you know, it sounded great. I mean, it's like, exactly. That could be in the song. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
But to have that and then say, you know what, this needs to go here. That's a lot of musical character, something to aspire to, is be able to do that. Like, you know, I just did this stuff. It's pretty amazing. You know what I mean? It fits. It sounds good.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound too busy. I'm not playing over the vocals. You know, what's wrong with that? But to like get in there and say, you know what, check this out. You know, I'm going to play less. You know what I mean? I'm going to play different. So totally. Yeah, that was pretty amazing.
It is. It's something for all of us to think about. It's like, because if you would just stop at that first, you know, the first take and the first impression, then you'd never get to that cool, you know, who knows where you can go if you really just apply yourself and be more critical of what you're doing and playing and how it's going to fit into the song. Because it can just kick it up unbelievably, you know, in terms of what the final product is. And this is, I just loved that this was such an example of that, right? Of the importance of choices being made for parts. Because you're right. I mean, the guitar stuff he was doing was, yeah, it's cool. It's soulful. He's got some cool kind of bluesy Hendrixy thing going on in there. But it's like, man, once he started playing just the partial chords and some partial arpeggios,
the whammy,
and the whammy bar was just, oh man, it was just like, yep. I was doing some research on this too. And I think Neil Finn might have played a 73 Gibson Les Paul Deluxe on this one. He was playing that a lot back then. He also plays like a red Duojet. I know, a Gretsch Duojet, but but
there's definitely a chorus strat on there, but I think that's Tim Pierce.
Yeah. I just loved revisiting this song because I love this song, and it was over. I mean, this song was played everywhere. You're right. I mean, I don't think there's anywhere in the world that you could get away from this song at that time, but I still love it. It holds up. It's such a great song, and Neil Finn's such a great writer, and that band is great too, or was great of that musicians. That's what I dug about that band too, is the musicianship. My friend Mark and I saw them in the 80s at Bumbershoot at the Coliseum, and it was so cool. They were amazing, and they sounded great live. And I've seen them, I think, a couple times since then, but you know, again, that's what I love about that band. Good songwriting, great musicianship, and in this instance, just the right decisions being made about what parts to play and apply guitar-wise. Cool, man. Yeah, I dug revisiting that song. The last one Chris sent me, which I really dig this song and this whole vibe. It's Dennis Coffey and the Detroit Guitar Band, and the album is called Evolution, and the song is Scorpio. And this thing is so of it's time. I love it. I mean, I love this kind of stuff. It's funky. It's very rhythm oriented, and it's a guitar band. So there are these parts in the song which are literally 9 guitar parts sewn together to create these kind of cool horn-like passages, which I totally dug. That stabbing kind of horn sound it's guitars, which I totally dug. I'm a child of this era, so anytime I hear this kind of stuff, I'm sucked right in, because it just again, nostalgia. I love that time period in my life of music. Listen to the AM radio with all this cool 70s stuff going on, you know, and this song is so indicative of all the things I love about this funky kind of music, you know. And there's a great breakdown in this song that I love, and a bass solo and some percussion that's going on, and faint talking or rapping or singing in the background, which I totally dug. But I totally dig the idea of a guitar band, and this idea that we can create this music and kind of emulate horns and other things, but it becomes its own thing. And I highly recommend listening to this stuff, because it's, again, like, it reminded me of television, the way television kind of approached guitar, right? It wasn't the standard solos or anything else. It was more like the guitars became another instrument to kind of convey melody and other little instrumentation in the song, but it wasn't just the solo or rhythm, you know? So I think the way guitars are used in this context is super cool. I really dug this song. Yeah. Yeah.
That song is from the Evolution record. And again, on this record, there was probably better examples to talk about guitar, because there's a lot of really great shit on there. I picked this one for a couple of reasons. One is it was a hit, so people may be familiar with it. It was like in the top 10 hit for him. And another reason is it was 420 minutes long. And the thirdly and the most important one, this is the music that they used as a background for Saul trying to get fired on Better Call Saul. But so, yeah, it's like, it's an important song for that. But no, Dennis Coffey, I discovered this guy. I'm a relatively newcomer about 10 years ago, and I don't even remember how I fell into him. But I just love, I've only got 2 of his records. It's this one and the one right after it. And I just love his music. It's like, this record is like 70s cop show music at times.
Oh.
But Dennis Coffey is a super, super interesting dude. He was a funk brother. He was in Motown in 66, post 66. And he was the dude that brought like the wah-wah pedal, the echo plex, and all of the like rock elements to the Motown stuff. He played on one of my favorite songs of all time, Frida Payne's Band of Gold. He does like the sitar solo on that. So he was on all this really influential music. He's from Michigan. That's another good point. It's something I listen to all the time. I'll go for weeks just listening to these 2 records I have because it's so great. He just has this incredible funk sensibility. I mean, that song, Scorpio, that song was sampled by so many rap people. It's like Public Enemy, Queen Latifah, the Beastie Boys, LL Cool. It's all these people sampled that and, this other song of his because he just had this feel for like this perfect funk and like the breakdown in the song. You can definitely hear that. It's like, yeah, that got sampled a lot. So he was a really cool dude that brought, kind of like a hard rock element into Motown. So you had all that brilliant Motown melody and stuff, but you had things like echo plexes, wah-wah pedals and shit like that. He introduced that. I mean, on the Evolution record, he does Whole Lotta Love. He's got a version of Whole Lotta Love, and it's great. You know what I mean? He was a rock dude. He's still playing live. He's still amazing. Somebody that's, just really, as a guitar fan, it's just somebody really great to experience because he's just like, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And I really like the way certain people use instruments in a way that I hadn't thought about or anticipated, but which was just in this song. Basically, he's emulating a horn section with guitars, and it's effective. It's super cool. But your ear kind of goes to the horn thing, but then when you listen to it more, you're like, no, that's not horns. That's guitars, and it's so cool because the way they're played and set up, it's just so, obviously they're trying to evoke the horns, but it's so cool. I just love the way they did that.
Yeah, and it evokes Beretta too. Yeah, it's like the 70s cop shows. It's just really cool. I love that shit. I mean, it's just really cool. Again, it's evocative music for a time, but it's timeless and it's taking the guitar away from what we're used to. It's somebody coming from like a pop soul kind of background and kind of making something cool and interesting from that with his guitar vision. So it's something great. I'm really glad I found it. I can't believe it took me so long to find it, but I did, and now I enjoy it very often.
I love it. Yeah, and I love the Michigan connection too.
Yeah.
Everything's full circle. Well, that was awesome, man. This is another 3 for 3. We're going to do more. It's just so fun because we get to revisit music or discover new music, and hopefully you guys get a kick out of it, and hopefully you can get inspired and listen to stuff you haven't heard before or revisit stuff that you haven't listened to in a long time. But thanks for listening. We really appreciate it. We're members of the Ruinous Media Network. Still psyched about that connection. Listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time.
Adios.